In this video, we're looking at the new Tail 2 PTZR camera from OBSBOT. I've had a love-hate relationship with PTZ cameras. They are incredibly practical, especially the promise of being able to control your camera when you are shorthanded on volunteers or crew to actually man a camera for your video production. But the reality of PTZ cameras has always been disappointing to me, especially when it comes to trying to track a moving subject on stage. Nothing really compares to a manned camera. Well, I have to say this Tail 2 has completely challenged my thinking on this. When OBSBOT contacted me to take a look at the Tail 2, I knew of OBSBOT as making kind of glorified webcam PTZ cameras. Their previous smaller camera, the Tail Air, has a lot of interesting features, but only having USB out was really limiting when it came to its usefulness in a live production environment. But I had heard that this Tail Air had great tracking, so when I saw that the Tail 2 had an SDI output, that really sparked my curiosity and interest in taking a look at this camera. A quick tour around the outside of the camera. On the back, we've got the power button. Like a lot of things now, you tap it once, then hold it for a couple of seconds to turn the camera on or off. There is an 1/8" stereo mic and line input for audio, a full-size HDMI connector for video out, connectors for RS-232 PTZ control, the BNC connector for SDI output. The Ethernet network port is used for a lot of things. You can control the camera, it can send out video, and you can power the camera through PoE. Then there are two USB-C ports. The top one is used for a data connection to your computer, and the bottom one is used to charge the onboard battery. Yep, you heard that right. This camera has an onboard battery. The specs say it will run for 5 hours. I ran the camera for a couple of services on a Sunday, and it lasted the whole morning just fine. Coming around to the side, there is an SD card slot, so you can record directly in the camera. Because of that battery, you could set this camera up somewhere and just record to it directly as a completely standalone production. Or if you're using it in a production environment where you're using the HDMI or SDI outputs to a video switcher with other cameras, you can still record onboard the camera for an ISO of the camera's feed. The front of the camera has I should say three indicator lights. The bottom row of lights are a battery life indicator. The light here at the base of the PTZ mechanism is a mode indicator. It tells you what the camera is doing. And then there is a tally light indicator on the top of the arm. The bottom of the camera has a standard 1/4-20 mounting point, and this connector, which isn't documented, so I'm not sure what it's for, maybe a future connection to some other device. But it's also worth noting the camera has some sort of magnet on the bottom. So if you place it on something metal, it just has a more secure feel. It's not going to move. It's not going to stick to a wall or anything, but it just holds it nicely in place so it's not going to move easily. There are many ways to control this camera. Let me show you a few. OBSBOT has this little handheld controller that they sell as well. It's a bit tricky to get this to link up. To pair the camera and the controller, first you need to download the OBSBOT Center application and connect to your camera over USB-C. Then go to the More page and scroll all the way down to the bottom to find the pairing button. Turn on the remote control feature here at the top and then click Pair. Now on the remote, press the AI button and hold down all three camera selection buttons at the bottom until you see it pair with your camera. Now you can control your camera with the handheld remote. I believe this remote uses Bluetooth, so you'd be limited to those ranges practically. For me, I was able to control the camera anywhere in our sanctuary with this remote. You can control up to 3 cameras with this remote, and it also has a battery built in, so I think this is perfect if you're just recording locally on the camera for some sort of production and want to have a way to control the camera without setting up too much equipment. You could also use any Visca over IP controller. For instance, I've got this old PTZ Optics joystick controller. It's connected to my network via an Ethernet cable, and then you'll need to connect the camera to your network as well for control. To configure this to work, first we need to set the camera's IP address. Back in the OBSBOT Center application on a computer with the USB-C port still connected, just go to the Settings gear icon at the top, and here in the Settings, click Modify next to the IP addresses. And you can enter an address manually or set the camera to obtain an IP address from your DHCP server. Now enter that IP address into the PTZ controller, and now I'm able to control the camera with my joystick for my pan, tilt, and zoom controls. Now I will say, to get the most out of this camera, there are so many other camera-specific controls for the tracking and exposure and image control that I pretty much recommend always having the OBSBOT Center application open and connected to your camera. Once you have the camera configured on your network, you don't need to have the USB cable connected anymore to it. The application will connect over the network from your computer to the camera. And if I were filming in more of a standalone setup with this camera where I didn't want to have a computer with me, there is a phone app, OBSBOT Start, that does just about all the same things as the Center application. And in those apps, both on your phone and on your computer, you have all the PTZ controls as well. So you don't really need a controller to operate the camera. It's really just a convenience, and I wanted to show you how to set that up. Let's walk through two different ways you could set up and control this camera. First with a video switcher and using the NDI output. And the second setup we'll look at is using NDI to a computer with OBS. For an SDI setup, getting the camera image into your video switcher is really simple. It's just connecting an SDI cable from the camera's output. I really love that these BNC connectors lock and then can't wiggle out of the camera like an HDMI connector can. And the other end of the cable goes into my video switcher, which brings the camera image in for my production. The SDI connection of the camera will output video up to 1080p 60. It's important to note that the SDI only outputs 1080p resolution at the frame rate you set the camera to. The full-size HDMI connection will output 4K at 60 frames per second. So if you're running a 4K production, you'd have to use the HDMI connection. Now, if I were to run an NDI setup, completely network-based, the Ethernet port on the camera can send out video via NDI. So all you would really need is that one Ethernet cable connected to the camera. I could get my video and control the camera over that one connection. And if you're using a PoE switch, you can power the camera that way as well. The NDI output from this camera has been rock solid for me. I've run it from the camera to OBS or from the camera to their talent device for days on end, and it's been solid. So kudos to OBSBOT for their NDI implementation. To set this up in OBS, all you need to do is be sure that you've installed the Distro AV plugin for OBS. That's the new name of the NDI plugin. There's a link to where you can download that down in the description of this video. Once that's installed, in the OBSBOT Center application, we need to turn on the NDI output from the camera. So that's over on the More tab again, and scroll down to Output. And we'll see here a toggle switch for NDI. Now back in OBS, create a scene for your camera, then add an NDI source to the scene and select your camera from the drop-down list. And there we have our camera feed coming into OBS. You could now use OBS for live streaming or recording the camera feed. This would be a really simple, all network-based solution for your video production. So now we have the camera set up. It's coming into either our video switcher or OBS for our video production. Let's look at some of the other things that I think are the highlights of this camera, especially as I think it relates to how I would use it in a live production. The first thing, and I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but the AI tracking features of this camera blew my mind. We'll look at that in detail in a minute, but the smoothness and organic feel it provided are the best I've seen. Its ability to track a subject with the framing you want is really something I've never seen perform this well. I didn't have high expectations for it, but I have to say, spoiler alert, it very quickly has become one of my favorite things about this camera. The next thing that caught my attention was the 1/1.5 4K 50 megapixel image sensor. That's a pretty decent sized sensor. There are lots of features they list about dual native ISO and about the lens, but it really comes down to what the image looks like. And I have to say, some of the images I've gotten out of this camera have been really gorgeous. The PTZR in the name of this camera means that it also has a roll axis. The first implication of this is that you can switch between vertical and horizontal orientation. And that's not a digital crop or anything, but it's actually rotating the sensor of the camera to achieve this. But another really cool side effect of this ability is that when you are shooting horizontally, the camera will auto level itself. In the camera controls, you can fine-tune this rotation if you want. So overall, a nice feature that makes setting up this camera quick and easy. I could see this being a nice feature for a portable church that sets up every week. One less thing to think about when you're setting up your cameras is not spending time leveling them. It has a 5x optical zoom and 12x hybrid zoom. So they're combining some form of digital zoom. I know the big question for most churches looking at this camera is going to be, can the zoom range it has work for me? So let's take a look at what kind of framing you can get with it. And I think you'll actually be surprised how workable it is in real life. And you can decide for yourself, can that work for you at the distances you have from your camera to your talent on stage? I set the camera up at varying distances from the stage, and I think for any church, the most fundamental shot you're going to be using this for is a tracking shot of your pastor. That's kind of the bread and butter of our live streams. This is at 20 feet. You can see it comes in almost uncomfortably close. That's probably closer than most anyone would want to be framing their shots. But even this close, the camera still tracks me really well. This is on the slow follow setting. There are various speeds you can set it to that will determine how aggressively the camera will move to track your subject. I found the slow setting gave me the most natural, organic tracking for a follow shot like this. And I'll even walk down the steps here and it still does a great job of following me. I'll even turn my back and try and run away and it keeps tracking me just fine. Then of course you can set a different framing for your tracking, so I'll back it out a bit to more of a cowboy shot, which I think is probably the most typical kind of shot you're going to use for a follow shot of your pastor on stage. You can see here I'm adjusting the framing. There are a few ways you can set the framing of your shot so that you get the headroom that you are wanting. Look how smooth that is. I'll go out on a limb and say you would need a really expensive tripod to accomplish that smooth of a follow shot with a manned camera. Okay, this is now at 30 feet. Starting with its close-up framing again, this is still a really tight shot, still probably tighter than you would use, and it's tracking me just fine. And at 30 feet, the cowboy shot still works great. This is kind of fun. I tried to get it to lose me behind the pulpit, but it always picked up and carried right on tracking me. Walking down the steps, I like the way that it reframes and adjusts the zoom level to maintain the framing. It really does feel organic and natural to me. Here's 40 feet from the camera to the front of the pulpit. This is the close-up framing. You can see we're getting just a bit tighter than a cowboy shot still at this distance. Still a very usable close-up shot in my opinion, and the tracking is still smooth and has no trouble following me. I am starting to notice the digital zoom on the image. It's not quite as sharp as it was earlier on in these zoomed in shots. Now at 50 feet, this is how tight a framing you can get. I messed up the exposure settings without realizing it here, but you can see that at the close-up shot setting, you get just a bit wider than your normal cowboy shot. You do now start to notice the image getting a bit soft with the digital zoom. I am still really impressed though with how smooth and natural the tracking is, even at full zoom and tracking from that distance. My first thought when I saw that the camera only had a 5x lens was to wonder how useful it would be for live production. And while yes, you're not going to be getting close-up shots of a piano player's fingers or something like that from 50 feet away, if you have a camera distance around the 30 to maybe up to 40-foot range, it's going to perform really well, especially with a cowboy shot framing of your pastor. And if you need that close-up shot of someone's fingers playing the piano, just put the camera on stage and use it that way. That's another thing I like about this camera. It's so small and inconspicuous, you could place this just about anywhere. Especially as simple as the cabling is, just an SDI line and an Ethernet cable, or even run it on battery and send the NDI over Wi-Fi, and you don't have to run any cables to it. That could really open up the capabilities to get some amazing angles of your productions with this camera that you might not have even thought of doing before. Here are a few shots I took in some different environments. Outdoors, it does great, and I really think some of these images are really gorgeous. I wouldn't call this a low light camera per se. It does hold its own even in pretty dim lighting, but it does need some sort of lighting to get the best image out of it. I have to say I'm really impressed with this camera. I wouldn't have any problem recommending this to someone who's looking for a PTZ camera, and on top of just being a good PTZ camera, you get a lot of other great features and capabilities packed into this thing. It just has a feel of being well thought through and well designed. I mentioned the magnetic base before, and another example, you can configure the camera to turn off and on at specified times. So that will be great for people who want to mount this camera up somewhere out of reach. I know powering the camera on and off is usually a concern for people in that situation, but this has been taken care of with this camera. If I was in a situation where I was short on volunteers and I needed to track a pastor on stage, I would really be taking a serious look at this camera, if I could make that 30 to 40 foot throw distance work. Even if for some reason I had a crazy long throw distance from the back of the room for my follow shot, its form factor is smaller than most cameras in its class, and it just has a really clean look to it. So it's also going to make a great camera to either put on a wall closer to stage or even on stage for some creative shots. Not to mention the built-in battery and NDI capabilities that can lead to some really creative camera angles. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of all this camera can do, so let me know down in the comments if there is a feature you want to see demonstrated. I'm going to be doing another video about the whole OBSBOT ecosystem with the Talent and the Tail 2 together, so I'd love to show this camera more in that video. Until next time, bye.